Welcome, welcome. Another new episode of the Gothic Heart. Today's guest is Dr. Rita, and she is a well known, renowned expert of the paranormal and many other things that she will let us know about. So excited to bring her on because she brings a whole new, fresh perspective to a lot of the things we've been talking about the past. And I'm so excited to dig in and learn. So I'm going to let Dr. Rita introduce herself and we'll take it from there. Go for it.
Great, thank you. So my name's Dr. Rita Louise, and I have worked for a lot of years. I don't even like saying the number anymore because it's just over 20. Um, as a medical intuitive, which is a person who intuitively looks at people's health. As a psychic, doing energy work. I'm a naturopathic physician with a PhD in natural health counseling. And I joke around that that's my day job because there's just a lot of other things that I get interested in, like ancient mysteries and personal growth and development and stuff and stuff. Because you're right, there's just too much to really list everything.
Well, we will focus today on, a lot of what you covered in your book. I want to make sure I get the title exactly right. So the book is called Ghosts, Spirits, and Attached Entities. So the Insider's Guide. So I would love to.
Is Dark Angels.
Dark Angels. Okay.
And
Yes.
Insider's Guide to Ghost, Spirits, and Attached Entities.
Yes, because that is something, first of all, I realize they are all different things, which a lot of people would think they're the same. So I would love for you to talk about the differences or what's going on in your book and then why that relates to the kind of work that you do.
Okay. So, I did this interview and it was a group interview and they were hung up on the title, Dark Angels. They're like, but angels aren't dark. I'm like, but ghosts are spirits, angels are spirits, and in my world, there's, guardian angels and, the higher level angels, and then you kind of come down, and then you get to like the lower vibrations where it's like you hit your basic ghosts, and then there are ones that are more malevolent that you might end up interacting with. And so what my book talks about are the more malevolent angels. But it really covers a very broad array. So growing up, I lived in a haunted house. There was the dead guy that lived in the basement, and it made me be scared of ghosts. So if something like falls down in the middle of the night, I'm like, but then I got contacted by a paranormal group that they needed a psychic to come and work with their group. So I went and did it and came to realize that I wasn't scared of the ghosts. I was scared of like the weird noises that happen, and the weird stuff that happens. Because it's like, oh yeah, there's a ghost over there. It doesn't scare me a bit. But one thing, because I'm gathering this is a fairly new topic to your listeners, and so I think this is a really important piece of information to share, is that you can have a ghost hang out in your house. So like I live in a historic house. I have 2 ghosts that live here that are thankfully pretty quiet and don't do weird stuff like at my girlfriend's house, where they're always doing things. And they're attached to the house. They just live here. But there are a lot of situations where someone that has transitioned, they've gone into the light, and then they come and visit you. So I remember this one time I was moving and my husband was doing something, and there was this man. This is my world. There was this man, invisible, obviously, sitting at the kitchen table, drinking a cup of coffee, smoking a cigarette. I was like, okay, so if your dad was here, would he be sitting at the kitchen table drinking a cup of coffee? And he goes, well, he was a rancher and he was always out in the field. I said, yeah. But if he was here, would that be what he was doing? He goes, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I said, well, he's here and he's sitting right there. And but he wasn't like haunted to our house. He was just excited because we just bought the house. We were just moving into the house. And so some people get really scared when there's some activity, but it might be grandma. It might be Aunt Sally that's coming to visit because there's something important going on in your life that they want to experience with.
I can see
So,
that. And that ties back in. We recently had a guest talk about ancestral veneration. So it ties in, with listening to your ancestors when they're trying to contact you. Huh.
mhm. And it doesn't
So,
mean that they're there all the time. They visit, they visit.
so what with your work that made you want to write this book to educate all of us?
So, and I know we were going to talk about this a little bit more, so I personally had an issue with an attached entity, which
Okay.
is a spirit that instead of like being connected to your house is connected to you specifically. And they're usually very negative and they are manipulative and they kind of sit in the background and try to control your thinking
Mm.
or worse. And it was interesting because I ended up having this battery of clients that somehow would find me. And I don't know how they would find me to have sessions about their ghost, and they didn't even know they had an entity attached. They just had this weird stuff going on in their lives. And it's like, well, you've got this guy that's standing behind you and blah, blah, blah. And I would help them move it out. So I had so much information and so many stories, plus I was very active with that ghost hunting team at the time that I was like, you know what, I can take all of this information and share it with, real life stories and examples so that they could understand better. It wasn't just brain food. There was actually like case studies in it. So,
Oh, I love that. I mean, until I started really looking into it, I didn't realize the difference either. But now, as I'm having all these guests and things come on the show, I'm really starting to learn and see the differences and why you would want to focus or know about the differences so you can know what's going on, especially when it's pertaining to you. Well, then I know we jumped to attached entities, but I love that. So how does one know? I mean, it sounds like the people that are finding you, they know something's happening, but how does someone know versus terrible negative inner self-talk versus attached entity, or when to seek you out?
great question. So usually they come because they have that kind of an issue going. And so I would say, I'm just going to throw this number out, but it's not like a real number. That maybe 20% of the people have some kind of entity attachment. I mean, it's actually a lot higher than you would think. And what I find interesting is I have people that contact me and they're like, I have an entity attachment and blah, 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 blah. But they don't. They don't have an entity attachment. They just want to blame all of
Yes.
their life circumstances on this entity.
Instead of
And you look
taking
pretty
accountability.
young, but you look pretty young. Like back in the day,
Thank you.
uh, back in the day, everyone would use, oh, it's a past life. Like I have this bad behavior because it's coming from a past life. And people don't use that anymore. Now it's, I have an entity attachment. So if somebody contacts me and says they have an entity attachment, I already go into the session skeptical. Now, some people actually do, but a lot of the times they're just using it as they don't have anything to grab onto. You know?
Yeah. So, I mean, I could definitely see that as people not wanting to take accountability for changes or things that they could do in their life, and they just wanted to blame it on an attached entity. But is there any way other than contacting and working with someone like yourself that they can work through that or become unattached?
They can. It's a little challenging. Okay, so I mean, we have finite time, so I'm trying not to
No.
like
Okay, of
go
course.
into this whole big thing. But an attached entity, it's parasitic. It's an invisible energy vampire on your space. And so it's not in your auric field 24/7. But if something happens and you get triggered, so now you're potentially in a negative thought space, they are attracted to a very specific emotional vibration that you are emitting. So it's like hitting the bat phone. And when you hit that energy, they will come and then they want to amplify because now they're feeding off of that energy.
Got it.
But when you become whole again and you kind of return from being triggered and you're like, I'm good, I'm happy again, they move out of your space. And so I've had so many people that they go, well, I've worked with so many healers, but it keeps coming back. Well, what many of them don't realize is that the entity is tied to a negative emotional energy that you carry. And so until you clear the negative emotional energy, anytime you get triggered, the entity can come back.
Okay, because it wants.
Does that make
Okay,
sense?
yes, because it feels it and it wants to feed off of that again.
Right.
That does make sense. So it all works in tandem. Just getting rid of it isn't enough. You also need to heal within whatever is
Correct.
bringing it. Yeah.
I mean,
Okay. So
because the healer gets it so that, they're like, not the entity attached. And then the healer gets them back to like, oh, I'm good. And their boundaries are strong and they feel whole. So now the entity is over there somewhere, not in their face. And so they think, oh, I'm healed. But not really. Like sometimes they can make it so that they're not triggered by the same thing as often. I mean, that's like the best case scenario.
right.
So they finally make that final transition, but a lot of people don't. They don't.
Or they don't
wanna
realize
take
that part.
ownership.
Well,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So you help with all of the parts, right? Not just releasing the entity, but also helping them work within, so it's not going to keep coming back and keep happening.
Well, correct. So we were talking before the show. I have a brand new book called "Dang, It Was Me All Along," which really it's more like
Oh man.
which really addresses the negative emotions and the negative thoughts that we have that can underlie an entity attachment. I mean, the book was originally written for people that have had trauma, or ruminate or get triggered very easily. I mean, that was kind of what the focus of the book was to how to start separating out, this is who I am, and these are my negative thoughts. And what do I need to do to not have those negative thoughts anymore?
That is so on topic just for my life right now. My oldest daughter, she's only 9, but her inner self-talk is just so mean to her. And we're trying to go through with, or we're trying to work on those very things, like separating it out. And well, is this really what people are seeing, or is this just how you're seeing yourself? And all of those things, just she wants to externally blame it. But on the other hand, well, none of these people are actually saying these things about you. You're saying them about you to yourself. So let's work on that. So that could not be more timely for what we're going through with my oldest right now.
Well, and one of the methodologies that I talk about in the book, there's actually I'll share too, is if you catch yourself going into a negative thought, catch yourself. Because a lot of the times something happens and we hit a negative thought and then we feed it. And we
Spiral.
allow it to fester inside of us, and then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
I know
So
that.
so that's one part, is to catch it and go do something else. Go color. Go. It doesn't matter. Something different. Just but stop that thought. But then with that negative inner critic, so here's your homework for your daughter. I'm sure that if you start really listening to what that inner critic thought is, it'll come down to 2 or 3 phrases that will repeat, or variation of those same things that will repeat over and over and over again. And those are the ones that need to be addressed. And so one of the techniques that I have in the book, and this was a Sangha Roman technique, which, oh my God. It's like I tried it on like bawling as I'm working through this thing.
So it's a good one.
It was a really good one. Is you take what the negative thought is and then you switch it around into kind of an affirmation. So if you think I'm ugly, you change it to like I'm beautiful. And then you write down, and I think she's probably old enough to be able to do this, and write down the first thing that comes to mind. No, I'm not. I'm really ugly. And then you write again, I'm beautiful. And the first thing that comes to your mind, you write that down, because it brings up all of the negative thinking. And at some point in time in that exercise, the thoughts start to change and a level of acceptance comes through, and it really breaks that program. And there might be a lot of crying involved as you're sitting there, like working through it. And it was so easy to do. I mean, okay, emotionally, maybe not so easy. And it took me a couple of days emotionally to recover from doing it, because it was some very deep seated stuff. But she's 9, so it might not be that bad.
No, it's just, I mean, we just finished third grade, so a lot of popularity and cliques and those kinds of things started happening, and whew, I was not prepared. My other two are only 7, so
Uh-huh.
but no, that's good. But what you said, I was writing it down. What you said is what I went through. Basically, about 13 years ago, I sort of had my breakthrough just with my different styles and personalities and things. It was always, well, you should be like this, or you should be doing this. And, I would always worry about all that stuff. And then finally, I realized I I liked myself, but I actually like that about me. I like that. So I'm just going to find someone who likes those things too. And I understand what you say when it's just like a breakthrough, it's a relief, it's everything. So if we can help anybody get there before, well, I was 29, and then my other breakthrough at 40 when I was like, hey, I can actually be myself in business as well. You can help
Wow.
it for people sooner, right? Then we're getting somewhere. But you had said something earlier that really caught my ear about the different levels of spirits and the guardian angels. I mean, I know I hadn't planned on talking about this, but I thought it was really interesting. Can you just expand on that, and how do they play a role, and
I
what will
mean,
we
I'm
see?
really not an angel expert.
Oh, okay, okay.
I just talk about like evil things, you know?
Oh, well, I mean, that fits with our, the Gothic heart, but so, I mean, in theory, maybe it could be the one that's giving us the good verbiage?
Yeah. So, you know, I believe that, we have a guardian angel, but some people might call it our spirit guide, but
Okay.
it's that being, that spirit that kind of watches over us and gives us insights and guidance. And, I have learned through a bunch of whacks up the side of the head for not listening to listen and pay attention to what they tell you, in mundane things and then in more important things. And it's easier to start paying attention to the mundane things, even though they sound so mundane. So for the listeners, I have a really great story. So this is the most recent one. So I'm working on this house because I like stuff. And I have a bathtub that has water. And that's all the water that's in the house. But now the bathtub is clogged up. And I'm freaking out. And I really don't want to call the plumber because I don't want to call the plumber. And so I stressed about it for quite a while. Just like, don't run the water off. It's just filling up the tub. And I was like, there's got to be something I can do. And I get this little thing. There was a plunger that was in the house when I bought it. They're like, take the plunger to the tub. I'm like, and
Yeah.
I listened and I'm like, bam, no clogged drainage. And it was just a 5-second fix. And so our guide will sit there and give us that information. But all we have to do is listen to it. And sometimes it just seems so stupid. Like, why would I take a plunger to the tub?
Yeah.
Why would I pay attention to that? But I have found, that usually it's spot on.
And just don't disregard it when you hear something.
Don't disregard it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so all of I know we've bounced with both of your books, but well, you have more than two, I know, but the two that we've been talking about, and they've been super applicable, just both together. But with the Dark Angels book and the ghosts, the spirits, the attached entities, and you do a lot of work with people. what other than, I know you sometimes just see it, as you told us in our in your stories, but what other methods do you use for, even when you were with the ghost hunters, etc.? Like, what do you use to help figure out exactly what type of paranormal entity that you're working with?
I just look at them
You
and,
just see it?
it's
Well,
just,
because I saw on your website you do readings and you do a lot of other things. So when is which one appropriate?
so when you're working with a ghost hunting team, um, doing a clearing on a house to move a ghost out is not part of their per. Now, the homeowner might come back and say, "Hey, can you have somebody come and do a house clearing?" But it's not part of ghost hunting. But I have done
Okay.
house clearing, and it's a form of energy medicine. So, you can do like Reiki on someone or therapeutic
Gotcha.
touch. And so, you don't have to have a person. You can actually use similar type skills on clearing a house, which would include getting rid of the ghost if they want to go, because you can't force them.
Okay, so that makes sense. You had so many different options for healing, and like you just mentioned, Reiki, and then there was readings and all those things. So I just I didn't know if there was a certain right one that's better for different things, or if it's just whatever's right for the person.
So there were a lot of people that like just work with certain techniques, and
Hmm.
my personal methodology is, especially with healing, is I ask the person, like not verbally, what do you need me to do? And I just open myself up to receiving that guidance. It's like, okay, do this. Okay, don't do that here. Well, do some Reiki over here. And I just go with where I'm being led. I
Okay.
had this one client, it was just so weird that I kept getting, "You need to pray." I'm not a praying kind of gal. And it was like, okay. And I had nothing, I mean, and he was Muslim, so I really had nothing. And so and he was a very spiritual man. And so I said, this is the guidance I'm getting, but I don't know what to do that's going to be congruent with you because, say Hail Mary, I'm not feeling it.
Yeah.
And so he started praying. He's on the table and he started praying out loud. And I just supported that space so that he could receive the blessings from that prayer. It was a very profound experience. It was I'm getting like freaking goosebumps.
Well, so what I'm hearing, I mean, earlier you had mentioned how you just get interested in all these different things, but what I'm hearing is that's the huge benefit of having you as your healer, the person that they're going to, is because you do have experience and can help in all these various ways.
Mhm.
And so we've had people on for very, that can help in this way and can help in this way. And it seems like you sort of got a whole spectrum of little bits of what they do and everything, depending on what this person needs. You can really tailor it to what that person needs. So then my question or my comment is, how do people, so we talk about, not necessarily traditional psychiatry or psychology works for everyone. So there's all these other options, right? So how would someone know when it's the right time to move on to to these other options or go straight to you? Maybe they don't even know about souls or attached entities. Like, what would be a good thing for someone to be like that, to trigger them to know, like, hey, maybe this is something I need to explore?
When they feel like, so there are basically two different kinds of people. People that trust and follow like the more mainstream mob. They go to their doctor, they go to a psychiatrist or psychologist, and they talk, but they don't really get results. And then there are people that are more open to alternative things. They have an understanding that there's something not right, but they can't really put their finger on it. And they want to get some insights into what's going on. I have found, I had a client who had been in therapy for 15 years. And I was working with her issue. I don't know, she had a bunch of stuff going on. And after our third session, she said, it took me 10 years in counseling to get to where you've just gotten in our third session. Because I don't have to wait for you to tell me. I just like move step out of the way, and it's like, okay, well, here's an issue here. Oh, well, there's an issue there. Well, let's work on that.
You find it right away. I just worried, like a lot of the listeners or just people in general, I mean, we're so much more open than we were, even 10, 20 years ago. But how do we even give them that openness to even, think that there might be another option? So I like where you just said, if they just can't pinpoint something or something still feels wrong, like listening almost to their intuition, which was something we were going to talk about. So it just kind of came up. So then let's just kind of go over that a little bit. I mean, we talked about not disregarding when you hear things from people. And then maybe if you just can't put a finger on it, maybe that's a clue, like, we need to look into other options, right? Maybe for people who aren't traditionally as open or know about these things. But what else? Because I know intuition plays a big role in what you do and how you help people. So what else? What other advice or things can we watch out for there?
So sometimes it's challenging for people to separate out what's their ego and what's their intuitive guidance.
Okay.
And our ego will sit there, like our inner critic kind of sits in the subconscious mind, which is tied to the ego, etc. And it's always telling us to go, 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 do, you're less than, there's always this funky, there's a very mental aspect to it. Where if it is your inner wisdom, there's always a heartfelt sense to it. It always feels good. So the stupid example I like to give is, would you like $1 million?
Always.
With a smile on your face?
Always.
You want to do your taxes? It's so people recognize, like, this feels good and this doesn't feel good. And so if you are thinking about doing something or something going on and it's giving you anxiety, there's something going on. There's something not to your higher betterment going on.
Okay. So then how do I know when to not listen and expel it from my life so I can keep the better feelings and my betterment going versus, like, obviously we can't, just expel taxes, right? That's just, a necessary thing, we have to do. So how do I mean, because I'm hearing you, because I mean, running my own company, you have your own thing. I mean, yes, there's anxiety all the time. And of course, tasks I don't like to do. So not necessarily those, but when, I guess it's almost, I'm talking about boundaries, right? How do we know when it's the ones like, nope, you're leaving, I'm not listening?
Well, I mean, doing taxes, we really don't have a choice about.
Right.
It really
Exactly.
becomes the thing of surrendering,
Right.
to doing it.
So, right, we can't expel that one, but,
Expel that one. But if there's something, all right, I'll share. I'm a story person, so sorry.
Good. Stories are great.
So this was a number of years ago, and it will become evident as I end the story. So Whole Life Expo used to do New Agey health and wellness conferences around the country, and they were always big events. And they had come to Texas and were in Austin one year, and I literally did not get out of my chair for 3 days. I was just busy. Well, they were going to come back, except instead of being in Austin, which in a Texas thing, it is like 2 to 3 hours from 3 other major cities. And they were going to move to Dallas, which is a 5-hour drive from many of the major cities, which I thought was not a good move on their part. But I've done a number of their events. And so my brain was like, but you always do good, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there trying to talk myself into coughing up the money because it was pricey. But my heart kept going, I'm just not feeling it. And that went on for a really long time where I was like trying to take it doesn't feel right and justify it into, I'm going to go and buy a booth. And finally I said, you sit there and you lecture on this and you're just not getting a yes. You're not getting a yes on. So I chose to not get a booth. And I had people like, are you getting a booth? Because they knew that I like doing that. And they're like, no, I'm just not feeling it. Fast forward to the day of the event or the weekend of the event, and 2 airplanes hit the Twin Towers in New York City the day before the event started, and all the airlines were shut down, and most of the speakers, if not all of the like keynote speakers, were not able to attend. So had I not listened to myself and accepted that mental, but you can make good money versus it's not feeling right, I would have paid the really high fee for that booth and would have been sitting there twiddling my thumbs.
Yeah. See, the story brought it full circle, because when you first started, I wasn't exactly sure, but when you told, or what it meant, but when you just said that story, I get it completely. It's actually something I do in a different way, but the way that now that you just put it in, I see that I'm doing it. I just wasn't consciously saying that. Like when I started my own company, I mentioned this on an earlier podcast, just sort of why, right? What was I going to optimize for? Flexibility for my kids, et cetera, like being able to be there for my family versus my corporate job, all those things. And now when I'm feeling that way, like I feel like I should because this, but I'm like dreading it, right? Like you said, like my heart's not in it. I look back, well, if I do it, is it going to feed one of these things that I am doing this for? And if it's not, then I'm not. So it's almost the same thing. I'm just looking at it like a list, right? Instead of just in here, but I get it completely.
And we all process our information differently. Like for me, the stupid plunger thing was, just this picture of a plunger in my head. And I'm like, okay. I had a turkey baster situation too with a stopped up dishwasher. I'm like, all right, what I'm doing isn't working. What could I use? And I see the turkey baster. Now that was just like really off the wall, but it worked really good.
So that was fun. Well, my husband is very, he's a scientist, he's a physicist, he's an engineer, and not open to any of the things like I always am, and I'm always talking about and learning about. So I'm always trying to tell him, well, no, we just justified that. We can't disregard this. We can't, this happened for this reason. So the more experts like you that I have come on, I'm just like, I'm validated here, validated here.
Even engineers have intuitive gifts. And so when my kids were growing up, so I have 2 stepkids, and excuse me, and they would sit there and talk about like some coincidence that happened, like, oh, well, this coincidence. And I'm like, no, well, maybe you were having a psychic moment. And after just changing the vocabulary, one day one of them came over, was like, I had a psychic moment at school.
Yes.
So maybe, just raising your husband's awareness of his intuition at work that he's just in denial about.
Oh, I do. I will bring it up all the time. I'm like, look, see? And no, when something, intuition or misplaces and finds, just all of those things, I always point it out. One day, I'll get there. We've only been married 13 years. Let's keep working on it. So yeah, I've loved everything that we talked about. We didn't get through everything, but I really like where we went, and especially I can't wait to try transforming the inner negative talk into a positive talk and just see where that goes for her. Well, and me. I mean, we all have it. Don't get me wrong. Lots of anxiety going on in your own company, right? Or when you're doing all the things. So, but did you want to, or I wanted you to just let us know about your podcast, books, all of the things, in case people, well, maybe they're not ready to necessarily reach out, or their minds are kind of opening, but they could learn more about what you do?
Sure. So, the easiest way to find out about me is by going to my webpage, which is soulhealer.com. That's SOULHEALER.com. And all my books are available there. Which you do have to pay shipping, but they all consign, which is priceless, or on Amazon or, the regular booksellers. But this is something I think your listeners will really appreciate. And so I do a live stream, and it's called Thursday Night Live with Dr. Rita Louise. And I open the show with talking about a topic. So we'll talk about like narcissism or gaslighting, or last week was vaccine lettuce, which you would think is a giant conspiracy theory, but it's not, which kind of blew me away, which was why I talked about it, because I'm like, what? Anyway, but then after the first 15 minutes of the show, I open up the chat room, and people can get a reading. They just have to say, I would like a reading, and give me a number from 1 to 3, and I give them a 1-card general reading live on air. It is so simple. There's a great community of people, and you can just come and hang out and watch. You can come and get a reading and check it out for yourself, to see if I'm like the person for you.
That is perfect. Like almost like a trial, right? Without investing, and see. Oh, I'm gonna get on tomorrow's. I'm trying to remember what day it is.
It's Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central.
Okay.
And the easiest way for people to join, although I'm going to say this, and I'm having YouTube issues.
Well, I will link everything below as well for anyone listening or watching.
But I'm just going to say this out loud. But if they go to YouTube and they go to Just Energy Radio, so that's 3 words, Just Energy Radio, and on Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central, and click on the live button, it's through that interface that they can go into the chat and ask questions or socialize or whatever. That's the easiest way to do it.
I love that. How many healers or people that work on mental health or blockages or anything give you like a free consult or a free trial? I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but this is amazing. I love that idea, especially I'm going to do it myself.
I like doing it. I mean, it's fun. If I wasn't getting satisfaction, if like my little guys were going, okay, you need to do this, then I wouldn't do it.
Right. You're feeling it in your heart, your intuition, bringing it all full circle. Okay, well, very excited about that. So I'm glad you shared that. And I'm so excited about all the, I mean, I'm just learning something every week when I keep doing these podcasts. And I learned so much from you. So I appreciate it. And the crazy thing is, this is just one of the many things that you could bring or talk about on the on the podcast or on anywhere. So I'm sure I will reach back out in the future. But anything else you want to say for our listeners before we head out?
I mean, just kind of based on what we were talking about, listen to yourself and honor that voice and that message that's coming to you, whether it's a kind of an auditory inner voice thing or a picture or a feeling. Honor it and listen to it. Doesn't mean you can't argue with it, because I argue usually. But then do it, because you'll start to see profound changes in your life.
I can't wait. I mean, even though I didn't think about it that way, that is exactly what happened when I was 40 and started doing this and noticing those things and making all of my decisions based on my list of what I was optimizing for and wanted for my life. So I know exactly what that feeling is. So I love that you put it that way, because it's a lot easier to understand. And again, hopefully we can get people there sooner than I got there. So anyway, thanks again. Our listeners, please, everything is in the show notes below. You can find everything about Dr. Rita. Hope to see you guys on some of her Thursday night lives. And make sure you like, follow, share this with anyone who may find it fascinating, because that's how we keep it going. So we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.